Hello, dear listeners of the Mad Scientist Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Cogswell, here with my co-host, Marie Mayhew.
Oh my God. Cogs, you know what I was wondering?
What were you wondering, Marie?
I am wondering what it would take to build an elevator to the moon.
Oh my goodness.
I
Marie,
like to think that this is the ultimate burner question. This is what you would ask after smoking up for hours in college and being like, you guys, you know what? Well, what if you could build an elevator to the moon?
What if you build an elevator to the moon?
What if you could build an elevator to the moon, you guys?
We actually had somebody message us. I've got to find...
I mean, right after you would do you'd get back from laser Zeppelin, right? At the planetarium.
Okay. The concept of what Marie's talking about is called a space elevator. Also known as a space tether, as a space line, like a couple of different things over the years.
Not a space escalator.
Not a space escalator, though.
That would be equally
also
bitchin'.
Stairs. Thank you for the convenience. We're gonna talk about space elevators. Let's get into it, Marie. Let's do it. Jake, roll the tape.
Oh my God.
So, space elevator, Marie. First off, okay, how do you think it would work?
How do I think it would work?
Yeah.
First of all, you'd have to put down the bong. You'd have to have all the NASA scientists put down the bong.
Yes.
Walk away from the edibles. Let's get some clean, get some fresh air in here. I mean, it's feasible. Like when I was first seeing this come up, I was like, that can't be true. I don't know. Like, I would assume that you would need some, good Lord, that you would need some ginormous tether or some construction that would go past our atmosphere into space that a ship could a ship could attach itself to and be raised past that point. Like, I haven't even read any of the articles on this. This is me just trying to take a pot shot at it.
All right.
Like,
yeah,
is that right? Am I close?
You're actually pretty close. So, all right. So the initial idea. So first off, what do we actually mean by a space elevator or a space tether? These are the things. The first idea that came about for it was in 1895. A scientist from Russia named Konstantin Tsiolkovsky looked at the Eiffel Tower in Paris and was like, again, put down the bong, and then was like, what if we built a tower so tall it reached the moon? Or it went into space. And so what he thought was, if you built a tower from the Earth into space that was so high, it went up to what's called geostationary orbit. So the point in space where an object at that point in space will be stationary with the surface of the Earth that it's above. So basically, and that height is 35,786 kilometers. And so the basic idea is so the Earth is always spinning. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The Earth is rotating about its axis, and it's
round. First, let's just back it up.
All right.
Let's just back up and start with the basics. It's round, people.
The Earth is round. It's a sphere.
Check.
And it's constantly spinning. It's rotating about its axis, and it's also constantly moving through space, of course. Now, objects around the Earth are essentially attracted to its gravitational field. Yes. And again, we actually talked in the last series on time travel how gravitational fields, it's not really an attraction. It's more almost like almost a well in space-time where stuff starts to kind of move towards. So it's like, again, you hold it's like holding a bed sheet taut and then putting a bowling ball in the center of it. If you release other things, they'll start moving towards the bowling ball.
Yes.
So the basic idea here is that there's a point far enough away from the Earth that it's still attracted enough to the gravity that it'll spin with the Earth, that it'll always fall towards the Earth, but it's far enough away that the object as it falls will actually always fall in the same line.
So it's almost like it's spinning with the Earth.
So what it ends up looking like is happening is it's spinning with the Earth at a constant rate.
Yes. That is geostationary orbit.
Yes.
Okay.
So any object then so the top of the tower in this guy's idea would be in geostationary orbit, so that any object that you released from the top of the tower would also have enough velocity to stay in orbit around the Earth as well.
So it's a good idea in some principle, but like
it's a terrible idea. What are you talking about?
I was just trying to like just be like, a compliment sandwich, right? So it's a good first try. But like the tallest building at that time, I don't even know what it was. Like at a certain point, you just couldn't build any higher. And that's way before geostationary orbit is what my guess is.
Yeah. So the problem. Okay. So first off, what Tsiolkovsky thought of was what's known as a compression structure. Now, a compression structure is the way that most normal buildings are built. What do I mean by a compressive structure? A compressive structure is one, like Marie, like you're saying, the weight of stuff. So, like, pressure and weight are actually the same thing. Sort of.
Okay.
So pressure is just the weight of stuff above you hitting on a certain point. All right.
Yes.
So pressure, the equation for pressure mathematically, the way that we represent it is pressure is equal to force over area.
Mm-hmm.
And weight is just the force of gravity.
Yes.
So when you like go 10,000 feet under the ocean or in the ocean, the pressure you're feeling at that point in the ocean is due to the 10,000 feet of water above you.
Right.
Plus the weight of the atmosphere above you as well.
So it's kind of crushing you.
Exactly. So it's crushing you.
Yeah, it's kind of crushing.
So, and pressure, actually, it doesn't matter, like horizontal, like the pressure that like a really, it doesn't matter how wide the ocean is. If you're 10,000 feet down, you'll feel 10,000 feet of pressure. So it doesn't like the actual total amount of water doesn't matter. It's just the amount of water above your area, above the surface area that feels the weight.
Yes. Okay. Okay. That makes sense.
So for a compression structure, the biggest challenge is that if you're building an object that's 36,000 kilometers tall, that's 36,000 kilometers of object weight on top of on top of whatever the base of the object is.
So basically, it's just going to fall through.
Yeah, like it would just like bore into the earth.
Yes.
Yeah. So there's no object, there's no material on the planet that we've ever even conceived of that is strong enough to withstand that amount of weight. There's like a maximum height that a building could be, essentially.
Before it starts doing that.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's like determined based on like how much, what's the word? That depends. It depends on a bunch of different things. It kind of depends on like the ability of, it basically depends on like the amount of compressive stress the object or the material itself could hold on to. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So there's like a couple different things that stop us from building from building stuff that tall, right? And it's actually not just material either. It's like if you get that high up, like Marie, you travel to Colorado a lot. The difference, even in just like the atmosphere between like Colorado and say like California or New York or whatever, that's significant enough that it can make some people feel sick.
Yes.
So Yeah. So it's an
It can
issue of
definitely
like
slow you down. Yeah.
exactly. So it's not even just an issue of like it's not even just an issue of material strength. It's like human ability to like withstand that amount of pressure or not pressure.
Couldn't. Yeah. No.
Yeah.
So here's a quick question though, going back to your building analogy. So wouldn't it also matter, like, it would be affected with the what the object is being built on as well,
Yes.
right? How quickly it would bore into how quickly it would actually sink or bore into the ground.
Yeah, so you would so the base of the
Right.
object or the base like the ground where you decide to build this thing would
Right.
have to be like exceptionally sturdy and
Right.
strong as well. And
I
also
bring this
frankly
up-
probably quite wide.
Yeah. Well, I bring this up just because, talking about towers in San Francisco, the Millennial Tower,
Mhm.
right? Which I don't know if you've read about or know about, but it was this huge tower that was built downtown. Oh God, I want to say at least 5-6 years ago now, maybe more. Probably definitely more. So the Millennial Tower was supposed to be its state of the art. It was selling. This is the height of San Francisco real estate. So,
Mhm.
an 800 square foot space was selling for over $1 million. Right? They built all of it. I think they even accounted for earthquake with the top with water. Some water balancing something in the top of it. But what they didn't account for was that it would sink. So the Millennial Tower, because they didn't bore down to sea level or to whatever to get the moorings, they didn't take the proper precaution, and it is now sinking.
Yeah.
And so there are countless lawsuits about it, which is pretty crazy. So when they built when Oracle built the PeopleSoft building down here, they actually did do an entire excavation to get the mooring straight to be able to build. I think it's the PeopleSoft. It's some ginormous tower. It's pretty cool. Yeah. So I was just thinking like, so forget about even trying to get too high. By the time, if it's anywhere, I don't know what, well, maybe the ground in Russia is pretty rocky and pretty solid that they might be able to withstand some pressure. But at a certain point, you couldn't just do that anywhere if you could do it at all.
Crazy. Yeah.
That's my science light.
No, you're
Addition for-
you're completely correct. Like you would need not only that, but you would need a portion of the earth that doesn't move at all.
Right.
Which
Yeah, you couldn't have any seismic activity. The
right,
first
which isn't
crack,
which isn't anywhere. So
no.
that the idea of like a compressive structure just really doesn't work.
It doesn't work. It doesn't work.
The other problem.
Nice try though. Again,
So
closing,
it was a really interesting
that
idea.
compliment sandwich.
It was a really interesting idea. And so what then people, so this was proposed in 1895 by this guy.
Yes.
What was then proposed by another Russian scientist, or I guess an engineer, by Yuri Artutanov, said, well, okay, what if instead of doing a compressive structure, so like a tower, what if we use, like you were saying, Marie, what if you made a satellite that was already in geostationary orbit, and then you just throw a rope down, basically.
Then you just toss a rope down?
You well, kind of, yeah. Like you toss a rope down, and then you tether that rope
It's like a Bugs
to the
Bunny
earth.
cartoon or something.
So kind of. So you tether that rope to the earth, and then you have a counterweight above the tether, above geostationary orbit, to keep it in constant rotation with the Earth's surface. And so essentially what you're doing is you're going from an object that uses compressive strength, so pressure from above to keep it still, to using centrifugal force. So what does centrifugal force mean? Centrifugal force is this idea, or it's the sort of force that you get when you spin when you hold an object with a string in your hand and then you spin it around your head like with a yo-yo before your mom takes it away.
Pretty quickly.
You're spinning the yo-yo around. The force that the yo-yo feels at the end of it, and actually the force that's felt on the rope, is a centrifugal force. So what it is it's the force that is felt. So there's two forces that are going on. First off, you're spinning the object around and say a constant loop. The force that, and so this is also what you feel on like a roller coaster. So the force that feels like it's pushing you, it's pushing
Back.
you out of the circle,
Yeah.
right, or out of the loop. That's centrifugal force. The force that's kind of the force that the rope is feeling, that's kind of pushing it, pushing the rope back down, or the tension sort of thing. That's a different type of force. And then you have the path that the object actually spins in. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So the force that the force that the rope feels is centripetal force.
Oh.
Right.
Centripetal instead
Centripetal versus
Okay.
centrifugal. So this idea was originally published in Russia, and this is again in the 60s, so there wasn't like a lot of stuff coming out from Russia. So this was published in the Komsomolskaya Pravda in 1960. It wasn't available in English right away.
Yeah.
And basically what they said was, okay, well, if we did this, one of the things we'd have to worry about was the cable thickness would have to change. Like the cable itself would have to change thickness.
The rope.
Yeah, the rope.
Yeah.
Because the rope is so long that.
Right.
And here's the thing too. With normal like centrifugal force, with like an object on like a yo-yo on a string. The person, like, you're changing the amount of force that's there by choosing how fast you move the yo-yo, how fast you spin.
Right.
And the rope, the length of the rope is so small that there's not a big difference in the length, or there's not a big difference in the force that's felt along the rope. Does that make sense to you?
It does. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No,
But as the rope gets longer and longer,
it
gets harder and harder to retain that force so it'll spin.
So you have to spin faster.
And eventually you might hit a point, or you could hit a point where the rope is so long that essentially there's just not enough tension in the rope for you to actually cause the thing to spin.
Right. Okay.
Right. So there's basically a point where like you know, an asshole with a giant yo-yo, where you get tangled up in the rope. Right. So
I was thinking you were gonna say it reaches a point, and I'm like, where you knock over Dora's face, and then it's like,
no,
we're done for the day.
The problem is that the rope suddenly then in that sort of system, the rope you choose is really important. Like the type of the tether you use is really important. It has to be really strong. It has to be somewhat flexible, but sort of inflexible as well, so that you can get the right tension you need. And also, again, in this case, the force that so if you think about a space tether in this sense, the force that the tether feels, like the force that's felt at the Earth, right?
Yeah, it's going to be really different than what's felt. Yeah,
you're not only feeling the force of gravity from the Earth, you're also feeling the force of the pressure from all of the material above you.
Right.
So actually, at the space tether base, you would feel more gravity than other people outside of the space tether base.
Yes.
Or you would have more downward force pushing on you.
Right. And the amount of force, the amount of force pushing on the rope would change the closer it gets to Geo.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because you have less gravity.
And that's why you need the counterweight.
That's why you would need a counterweight. Okay. Hey, look, we're building this, baby.
All right. And so that basically was the proposal. And so that guy initially published it in 1960. Some other ideas came out like in the 1960s again. But really the next really serious one.
What's up with the Russians wanting to do this?
Dude, the Russians were like, we need to beat the Americans to space, but we have no money or materials.
Comrade.
Comrade.
Oh, I throw rope from space. You catch rope.
We build it out of
beat American.
Stalin's mustache hairs.
It's out of Stalin's
Strongest
mustache
material
hairs.
known to mankind. The next serious concept was published in the journal Science in 1966 by Isaacs, Vine, Bradner, and Backus, who were American engineers, and they called it the skyhook.
I remember this.
Yes.
I remember Skyhook.
So
I remember. Well, do I remember? Am I remembering this from a James Bond movie? Or no, I'm remembering this from a Batman movie. Forget
yes,
it,
the
forget it,
sky tether, the skyhook that Batman used to get out of China or whatever.
Maybe that's that.
Yes.
I know I'm remembering it before that. So, but I also remember it from the Batman movie.
Now, in their
That's pretty dope.
version, the cable would be straight. It would have no variations in cross section area. In their assumption, and what they ended up finding was that there was no material on Earth that could possibly be strong enough to make this work. Like they were like, what if we make it out of diamond? What if we make it out of quartz? What if we make it out of graphite? Like, what if we make it out of, like steel? Like they tried the best materials we knew of at the time, and they couldn't find anything.
Right.
Yeah. So, and that's we're gonna take a break and come back with more space elevator crap. All right. Now, so those guys in 66 said this can't be done currently. 75, another guy comes along, Jerome Pearson, and says, okay, well, what if we change around some of these things? Yeah.
Yeah.
So he said, okay,
well,
first
it's clearly
off,
not going to work as is.
no, it's not going to work as is. So first off, let's get rid of the idea that the cable has to be one length or one cross-sectional area. He said that's stupid. And it is stupid. That's not the way to do it, probably. He said that it should essentially be tapered. So in other words, like the cable will get thicker and thinner in certain spots where it needs to be. So the place where it has to be the thickest is where the object is in orbit, in geostationary orbit. Because that's where the tension it feels is the greatest.
Right.
Right, because that's the
end. Yeah.
That's the point where it's being pulled both from the counterweight side and from the earth side.
Yes.
So that's why it has to be thickest there, because it's feeling the most tension.
Yes.
And then said, well, okay, if that's the thickest part, we can make it thinner and thinner the closer it gets to the ends. And the point of that was to say you could limit the amount of force or tension, or not tension, the amount of pressure essentially, or kind of a pulling force that the rope or the cable feels at any point then.
Right.
Right. So it gets rid of those problems of like every single point in this rope has to be strong enough to support the entire thing.
Yeah.
Right. He also was the first person that suggested a counterweight that could be extended out. So basically, he's the first person to say, you start building the space elevator, but you don't need the counterweight already in place. You would just do that. You would do that basically kind of towards the middle.
A counterweight on in the middle of it, and not on the ends?
No. So
Okay.
So what I mean by in the middle of it is in the middle of construction.
Oh, okay.
So previous thoughts had been you put it into space and you throw the rope down.
Oh, that's right.
And he's saying, no, that's silly. We build it and then we put the counterweight up once it's like partially built.
I think that. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, yeah. Tracking.
What was really interesting was his counterweight, he said, had to be 89,000 miles off the surface of the Earth, which is about halfway to the moon.
That seems like a whole other construction issue. I'm just going to.
And so what he was saying, and basically it, like the amount of material and everything else for that design would have required like a tremendous amount of people. Like it would have required like multiple trips into space. Like it's just crazy. You know what I mean? It's like, well, at that point, why don't we just send spaceships out into space?
Yeah. Well, and the thing that's kind of crazy too is it's like this is just to get the base. The tether, right? This isn't even saying how things are going to traverse up and down.
No, this is
right?
just
or what it's
going to
do when it gets up. Like like when it gets up, what does it do? It's not like it's, there's another story that it can just step off on, it has
No.
to actually go into space. But the idea of this, I assume the idea of a space tether or a space elevator is financial and economic, right? Like how do we get things like things into space cheaper that aren't necessarily rocket propelled, that aren't necessarily ships, right? Like goods, like you're trying to get goods from one place to another is what I would assume eventually this would be. So it's sort of like, well, if you're just sending up like, I don't know, coconuts or whatever it is, right? Whatever the thing is, nuts and bolts, coconuts, bottles of jam, whatever, sending into space.
Bottles of
what's
jam.
going to happen to them when they're up there?
I need my fig spread for my cheese that I have up here, my moon cheese.
My moon cheese, right? But I mean, seriously,
you're sort of the issue.
Because isn't that the ultimate? Maybe I'm jumping ahead, but isn't that the ultimate reason that somebody would sink all of this money into it? It's not just to make, takeoff and trajectory easier. It's economics. It's like, this is how we are going to beat the Russians in getting all of this stuff into space to build a Death Star or whatever it is.
Yeah, it is definitely so. Okay, it's definitely, the idea is definitely, like you're saying, to transport materials.
Yeah.
Because, like, here's the thing. Every kilogram of weight on a space shuttle is thousands of dollars of extra development.
Yeah.
And every kilogram is another kilogram of something you can't have.
Right.
So they really have to, the weight management of like a space shuttle is extremely important. And so these technologies on space elevators or wherever, they're always like you're assuming completely correctly. The assumption is always that these are going to be used to transport basically bulk goods up and down.
Right.
And like maybe these will also transport people potentially, but probably not, right? The idea is always that these are going to be used to, like, we have a launch site, say like on the moon or on the tether or whatever.
Right.
So yeah, no, you're totally right. So I think your question of the economic kind of feasibility of this, like if the problem you're trying to solve is to get stuff into space, if your solution is that you require to put a bunch of stuff into space, that's probably not a good solution.
Well, it's a very costly solution. I mean, if it could be, well, we're already jumping ahead, but like we're already jumping ahead on the whole space elevator.
We don't even have a working model yet. The problem too, or the other problem too, is we haven't even talked about like we mentioned one other issue already, or actually you mentioned one as well earlier too, which was, okay, you have to think about what this will do to the Earth, like the Earth itself. Can it withstand this amount of force or this weight or whatever?
Yeah.
Like how do you build a stable enough tether point on either end? Right? That's kind of really what your issue boils down to with like the Millennium Tower, right?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
The other
what
one
is this doing to the Earth?
Yeah,
all this weight is it's like it's swinging something.
Right. The other issue is there is like lots of shit in space.
Oh my God, yeah!
Floating around, like you said before too, right? There's lots of there's debris and asteroids and like
there's got to be like 70 or 80 Teslas up there now too.
Oh, there's actually, it's really funny. One of the most famous, or maybe not most famous, my favorite object in space is a screwdriver that was left by a Russian cosmonaut, who never picked it up again. He just like left. They floated away, and he was like, "Well, suko bliat." Like, they just went away.
My driver of screw, it's gone. Oh.
So, and like besides that too, you can think like, will these materials degrade? If a piece of the cable breaks,
all this debris could be like hitting the tether.
Yes,
right,
100%,
and probably, destroying its, the integrity of it. So what happens if this tether snaps? Like,
well, that's what I was going to say.
Trebuchet or whatever Yeah, what happens if it snaps? That thing is flung
the
into
Earth,
space.
The Earth just goes flying into space.
But both of them do, right? Like if it's like if so it's spinning from the Earth, right? And let's say it snaps. Isn't this the same sort of trajectory as the siege weapon, as like
A trebuchet?
Yeah, the trebuchet, yeah.
So the Earth is heavy enough that the Earth is the weight. The Earth is the center of mass.
Right. Right.
So, or like the weight, the Earth is heavier than like, a million of these things together. So the Earth wouldn't change. What you could expect though would be, like you're saying, like a shot put thrower though.
Yeah.
If it snaps, we're shooting off like a big heavy thing off into space. Like we've basically created a death trebuchet, not trebuchet, a death shot put.
It's a shot
Yeah,
put.
I guess
it's
it is a trebuchet, really,
trebuchet.
a space trebuchet.
Yeah, space
trebuchet. And on top of that too,
kind of cooler.
On top of that too, like anyone who's ever seen anyone who's ever watched like a video of a cable getting snapped that's under tension, or even like I play guitar, if a guitar string snaps, it snaps a lot of force. It cuts you pretty. It can gash you pretty good. Like, just imagine this thing snaps and then like this huge cable comes ratcheting down to the surface of the Earth.
That could probably cause some damage too.
Yeah. So, all right, there's a lot of problems here. Right? We're being negative Nancy's.
We are never going to get that moon cheese up there. We keep talking if we keep thinking like this.
So
with our can't do attitudes.
The next big development in like the space elevator race, I guess, was the development of carbon nanotubes. And that happened in like the 1990s. Now, for listeners who don't know what a carbon nanotube is,
which is probably a few of us.
Okay, so a carbon nanotube. So we talked about we actually talked about in the last episode how carbon can take on a bunch of different shapes, like a bunch of different crystal structures, and how depending on the crystal structure, it makes carbon. It can be very, very strong like diamond, or it can be very weak like graphite rather. Or even coal. Like coal is all carbon. You can crush it in your hand. A carbon nanotube essentially is it's a sheet of carbon. So it's like graphene in that it's sheeted initially. But what happens with the carbon nanotube is the sheet ends like a piece of paper. The sheet ends sort of wrap around and come together and form a single structure. And so, carbon nanotubes are extremely strong. They're extremely, extremely strong. So the idea was, well, if we could use a carbon nanotube material, right, or a material that is strengthened with carbon nanotubes, then we might be able to create the tether then. And so one of the ideas was by Bradley C. Edwards, an American scientist, who said, we have a 62,000 mile long, basically a paper thin ribbon of a carbon nanotube composite. And so he said this ribbon would be big enough that like climbers could go up and down with rollers on it. And his actual system got the farthest of any of them into feasibility studies. Like they actually talked about how long would it take to build this?
How expensive are carbon nanotubes?
Well, so here's the problem.
Just out of curiosity.
Here's the problem that they all came to. Yeah.
Yeah.
The way that we currently okay, so let's just look it up quick. Carbon nanotube.
He's crunching
costs.
some numbers, folks. Lifetime science happening here.
When I was working in the lab, they were pretty fucking expensive.
You just have to put a lot on your credit card.
So this is a carbon nanotube. Sorry, say that again, Marie.
I said we'd be maxing out some serious credit cards. I hope NASA's credit score is good.
This is a 100 by 100 millimeter carbon nanotube sheet. It is $770.
All right, so it's It's a little spendy.
It's a lot.
It's top shelf. We got some top shelf shit
It's a lot.
happening here.
The problem, and this one is a multi-walled carbon nanotube array that's vertically aligned on a silica substrate. Okay, $1,300 each.
You would also probably need to specially construct, like that's just what, off the shelf?
So, well, these are just
carbon nanotubes.
Yeah, these are
materials?
just being bought. I mean, the problem with this, there's a couple of different problems.
What do you buy that on really quick? Is that like an Amazon thing?
A Sigma Aldrich.
Okay.
Chemical company. The problem with carbon nanotubes or any of these like carbon materials like graphenes or graphites, graphite, not so much, graphenes, whatever. The manufacturing process is super complicated. And well, actually, no, that's not true. The manufacturing process isn't super complicated. The problem is that they don't really exist out of water all that stably.
Oh, great.
They're not super stable outside of solution. And besides that, they're like, no one has ever made one. No one is like the longest anyone has ever made one is like maybe a meter long. Maybe a meter long.
Well, that's not really going to get us to the moon.
No.
So it went as far as the feasibility study, and then they're like, eh.
Yeah. Basically, they found like, okay, these aren't really that feasible. They're very, very complicated to make. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're they seem to have, so actually I just looked it up here. The longest carbon nanotube grown so far is about a half a meter long. And they're grown on a silicon substrate using chemical vapor deposition. And so essentially what that means is it's essentially you grow chemical vapor deposition is like you shoot atoms at a surface essentially. And grow it like a specific way. It's very interesting, actually. It's really cool.
How long? So does that take a long time to grow?
That I don't know, actually. I would imagine it probably takes. What does this paper say?
Because let's just pretend that you decided that you had to grow. Like you're like, okay, that's a good option. And we're somehow going to fuse all of them together, each of those half meters. Like the amount of resources that you would need to do that, to scale that up, is ridiculous. Like you couldn't scale that. That's unscalable is what my guess would be. You wouldn't have enough resources or enough real estate to do that.
No, I mean,
in a timely
it doesn't
fashion.
It doesn't really say here how long it took. But I would imagine though, just based on like I've worked with people that do chemical vapor deposition techniques otherwise, and usually it takes like a good day to grow something that's like, millimeters thick. So I'm assuming it took them a very long time, but I don't know. I don't know for sure.
Again, it just doesn't seem like you'd be able to realize anything. You wouldn't be able to get your raw goods ready for production for years and years and years and years and years, right?
No,
like,
no. And so the team that actually figured this out was the Google has Google X. Yeah. And so they looked at this as an option, and they basically found, okay, that there's just no way to make these carbon nanotubes yet that is going to work for this. So they just decided we're not going to worry about it right now. We're just going to keep an eye on carbon nanotube technology.
So Google X was looking into the whole space elevator thing as well.
Yes, a whole loads of people have
Amazon.
Like the amount of companies that are spending money on this to like try this is crazy.
I can imagine because if you were able to do this, if you were able to figure this out, this would be this. Even though I was making fun of it as a stoner thing, that would be a huge thing. I mean, scientifically, but I'm also going to say like money wise, like that would be insane.
It's really interesting. So in 2019, the International Academy of Astronautics published a report called Road to the Space Elevator Era. And in it, they said basically that they basically said like looking at all of this work that's been done and talking to people, um, space elevators still seem completely feasible and probably are closer than we think. Like a lot of what they're saying, a lot of what the issue is, again, is the strength of the material, and we make strides in material strength every year, you know. So at this point, it's only a matter of time, really, before somebody devises a way to make a graphene or a carbon nanotube or some other carbon-based material that is strong enough and manufacturably malleable enough, or malleable manufacturing wise enough to be used for this technology. So really, space elevator is like one of those things that in our lifetime, maybe we would see start to be built. I mean, they're already being kind of built and they're already being tested, but yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting one. It's a weird idea, Marie.
It's a weird stoner idea that actually would probably revolutionize a lot of things, which is, you know, I'll give it up to our stoner community, which happens kind of, you know, more often than not with some of that stuff.
Sometimes. Yeah. I mean, you know, definitely next episode, we'll be talking about why, you know, they call them fingers, but you never see them fing. You know, do you think Amy likes me? Like all that stuff we talk about with your stoner friends.
Amy likes me.
All right, listeners, thank you so much for listening to the show. If you've enjoyed it,
my cat's mind.
Please consider telling your friends and family about our show. Every new listener is a huge help to us. Consider supporting us on Patreon or leaving a like on our YouTube channel, which you can follow us on as well now as well. And thank you so much for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode.
Oh my God, that was hysterical.
Thank you again, dear listeners, for listening to the Mad Scientist podcast. I have been your host, Chris Cogswell, joined by my co-host,
Marie Mayhew.
If you'd like to contact the show, please send us an email at themadscientistpodcast@gmail.com. That's all one word. You can also follow us on Twitter at Mad Scientist Pod or at Team Giant Squid for Marie. And of course, you can see us on Facebook, on Instagram, and all over the internet as the Mad Scientist Podcast. And again, our logo is the one with the pumpkin head, so it's easy to see. If you've enjoyed the show tonight, please consider supporting us on Patreon, where the money that you give to us will help us to promote this show further, to make it better, and just to spend more time making it.
Because we love doing that.
We do love doing that. Our logo was designed by Carrie Shaheen. Our web design is done by Desdemona Howard. Woohoo! And our sound design is done by Jake Cardinal. Thanks